sometimes you, I, us, sometimes we discredit ourselves. Sometimes we don't like to give ourselves the full gamut of who we really are. It's just like, we'll plant, 17,000 trees. Like, I just planted a couple trees, and some of our counterparts are like, yeah, I planted a forest, and they planted 3 trees. You have to give yourself the full credit always, especially when you're trying to. Certain times you're supposed to boast about yourself. And she said, do not discredit the planting of one tree, because the planting of trees grows into a forest. And I thought that was so profound, because we do sometimes, like, Tayla, what have you done? Like, nothing really. I ain't done much. And people are like, hold on, pause. You did this, you did this, you did. I was like, oh yeah, I did do that, didn't I? And it's just like, you can't discredit yourself. You can't take away from all the good that you've done, or especially when you're writing your resume, when you're going over your achievements, when you're going over some of the community work that you've done. Do not discredit any of the work that you've done. When you're over here filling out applications, what have you done as far as philanthropy is concerned? I don't know. Church counts too. How many hours you gave to the church? That counts. Stop discrediting ourselves. As far as news is concerned, Tim Sullivan, the city's chief of staff of intergovernmental affairs, was cooperating with federal authorities, such as the theories are circulating in the wake of Wednesday's second indictment in the federal investigation into City Hall employees' relationship with local labor unions. Some legal analysts speculate that investigators had a breakthrough since the first indictment was handed out May 19th. I suspect that news from the first indictment broke some logjam and developed some evidence, and developed it quickly, said Paul V. Kelly, a former U.S. prosecutor who is now Boston-based defense attorney with Jackson Lewis. 30 days is a short period of time, but I'm betting something significant is going to develop in the meantime. He added, these cases don't get wrapped up in one slug like that. They tend to evolve over time, and it's like a domino effect. Sullivan, 36 years old, of Dorchester, was named in an indictment on Wednesday after earlier charges that his colleague, Kenneth Brissett, the city's director of tourism, sports, and entertainment, with union-related extortion. They now both face charges of conspiracy and extortion for allegedly withholding city permits from a popular Boston music festival, Boston Calling, until it hired union stagehands. If convicted, they face a maximum of 20 years in prison. There's this game that I play when we go out to lunch, when we go out to dinner, when we go out to eat. It's like, guess the bill. And whoever's closest, really, there is no game. It's just like, guess the bill. So I would love for you guys to guess, how many years do you think both of them are going to get combined? Because if convicted, they could face a maximum of 20 years each. But if convicted, let's play the guessing game. How many years collectively do you think they will serve? Yeah, I'll leave that right there. In other news, well, one of the things I do want to mention about Boston Calling, and I called this out the other day. So the harbor is having this whole half shell 40 shows throughout the summer, and Patti LaBelle was one. The only name that I knew. Mind you, I'm not the biggest person in music, but at the same time, I know a little bit. Patti LaBelle, out of 40 damn events, just Patti LaBelle. When it comes to Boston Calling, if you look at Boston Calling's past, they will have about 20 acts, and one of them will be a minority. One. This isn't a surprise. But they did get back to me as far as the Harbor Fest is concerned. They were like, oh, we plan on doing the history walk, the Freedom Trail. We're going to do the Freedom Trail. That's on the agenda. And I was like, okay, really? How many other events do you have? 100? And the Freedom Trail is one. But I'll leave that there. Civil rights leaders, clergy, parents, and educators issued a 4-point action plan on Wednesday to address concerns about racial inequalities at Boston Latin School and across the school system. I'm so glad they added that. The organizers, in a news conference outside of the school department headquarters in Roxbury, called for an overhaul of the admission policy for exam schools, which currently relies solely on GPA scores and GPAs and scores from entrance tests for private schools. They didn't say specifically what they would like to see change, but they said that we don't like the new system. We do want some alteration. And one of the things that David Banner, yes, please go get your David Banner tickets. One of the things that David Banner said in a recent interview is that, pause, why do you think everybody needs to cater to you? You don't. You can cater to yourself. You can. Don't sit back and wait for somebody to hand you something. Go out and go get it. There's one of the things that I don't agree with. Studies have shown that the reason why our children, what are we, 53% Black, Native American, Indigenous, Caribbean, all that great stuff. 53%, but what is it, 13% currently attend Boston Latin? It's not even a Boston Latin thing. This is a BPS conversation. This is our education is not equal at all, and we are talking about education today. So for all of my educators, all of my administrators, all of my principals, all of my students, today we are having an amazing conversation with David Johns. David J. Johns is the executive director of the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. I'll say that again because it is a mouthful. He is the executive director of the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African American. So I can't wait to see how the White House, because we made international news as far as Black at BPS is concerned, as far as the headmaster stepping down is concerned, as far as all of these racial slurs are concerned. We are in international news right now for racial injustice, racial inequality, what's going on in Boston. We're having that conversation, and I love that it's here. We need to take advantage of it and have an avalanche effect. This can't just die down. Like, I really feel like some people just want this to die down. Like, oh, we dealt with this you know, I'm just here for the comments. We dealt with this in the 60s and 70s, and, you know, that's not who we are anymore. You are darsh gone lie, because if that's the case, then it wouldn't have happened. We do. We need to be more mindful. When we do go and say, government, we want, we don't have a plan. What David Banner said, I've been listening to a lot of David Banner because, you know, he's here July 23rd. Make sure you get your tickets. One of the things that he said is, what does an architect have to do? When an architect sits down, what do they have to do? He said nothing, because they have a plan. Like, they don't have to figure anything out. They have a plan. We don't have a plan. We don't know what we want. Hey, give me something. Give me something. Okay, what do you want? I don't know what I want, but I know I want you to give me something. We have never, as a community, as one, we are the ones, shout out to my babies, we've never actually sat down and said, what is it that we desire? What is it that we need? What can we get? And one of the examples that a lot of people use are the fact that the LGBTQ community are having all of their needs met, quote unquote. The Latino community are having all their needs met, and it's not that they're having all their needs met, but baby, they have a plan. If you don't know where you're going, you're gonna get anywhere. We currently have a caller on the line. Good rising, good rising.
Good morning, Tim.
Hey, Miss G.
I called you because of the question you asked about the Sullivan case.
Mm-hmm.
I think how much time he'll get. I hate predictions. I don't like predictions. But I'm spiritual. So I say that he'll probably get a year. And for cooperating with the government, you know, they'll make it his voice as well.
So a year collectively, you think they'll both collectively be a year, or a year separately?
I think he'll probably, Sullivan will probably get a year because he's working with the government. And the other dude might get the most time if he don't.
So we're going to run the tape back later on when they get 8 months each. And say Miss G was right. I love you, Miss G. Thank you so much. Lord have mercy. As far as Black at BLS is concerned, we already know what it is. It's in international news now, but we've known that there was a problem. We know that there was an issue, and let's just sweep this under the rug. Let's just hide under the blanket and hope that the boogeyman goes away. It's not. Right now, race is probably the number one conversation anywhere, everywhere, always. Whether it's in sports, whether it's in education, whether it's in comedy, you can't go anywhere today without speaking on race. And, even if that adds into the Muslim conversation or the terrorists, because we're so ignorant. We think all Muslims are terrorists. I said this yesterday. I'm going to say it again, and I'm probably going to repeat myself 1,000 times. With all of those that practice Islam, which equals and means peace, with all those that practice Islam, if they really wanted us dead, every single last one of us would be. Period. No questions asked. All right? So we have to dig a little deeper and have more of a compassionate lens of people's religions, backgrounds, and even their circumstances. In Arlington, Virginia, in Kentucky, it was used to take 18,000 hours of irrelevant training. It took 1,800 hours of irrelevant training to become a natural African-style hair braider. That was because the hair braiders needed to obtain a cosmetology license to practice hair braiding. But the governor, Matt Bevin, held a ceremony signing SB 269, which exempt natural hair braiders in Kentucky from needing to obtain a cosmetology license. This is a victory for economic liberty in the bluegrass state. Christina Walsh, Director of Activism and Coalitions at the Institute for Justice, said, something as safe and common as hair braiding has no business being regulated by the government. If that's the case, baby, there's a lot of things we could say that about, right? IJ, which is also Institute for Justice, activist team helped Kentucky hair braiders organize to demand reform to the state's cosmetology licensing laws. Prior to the bill signing, the hair braiders in Kentucky were required to spend up to $20,000 on 1,800 hours of irrelevant training to obtain a cosmetology license to go into business. This put legal braiding out of reach for the Commonwealth braiders. You know what I miss? Just like I said a few months ago, and I know some people might get mad at me, I miss the crackheads. I don't like these new drug addicts. I really do honestly miss crackheads. I miss the girls who used to sit on the porch and braid your hair. Where they at? I really do. I miss the 80s and 90s. I'm stuck in the past. I really do miss my girls sitting on the porch in the summertime braiding hair, and I have not seen anybody. That was like the summertime thing. You would just see that. That's how you knew it was summertime, because everybody was on the porch. Somebody's getting their hair done. I miss it. I don't mean to be insensitive, but I really like these new drug addicts that look like trapeze artists. I don't know what's going on. I'm gonna keep my hands off that because I know it's a sensitive topic. But when black people were crackheads having kids taken away, no one cared. I'm gonna say it and say it again. The second patient in the United States is infected with a superbug that is resistant to every and all antibiotics. The second person infected with the E. coli strand that carries the MCR1 superbug gene. This gene makes the bacteria resistant to last resort antibiotics. This follows the discovery of a woman in Pennsylvania who had a urinary tract infection caused by E. coli that carried that same gene. E. coli, for those that don't know, you know how everything happens for a reason. There was this one time that Tayla was late. There was this one time that I was late and I missed my flight, and I did not understand why I had to wait 13 hours to get on another damn plane. But when I got on that plane, I sat next to a Midwest farmer who broke down to me what E. coli is, why we're having major problems. I had an amazing conversation with an organic farmer, and then at that moment, I knew why I waited 13 hours to get on a plane. But he told me the reason why, you know, like our lettuces and our spinaches and some of the nuts are filled with this bacteria is because when they spray, not only are they using Monsanto's disgusting, nasty, kill the bees, we can't even touch this stuff, let alone let other people eat it, chemicals, they're also spraying the residual of feces, or when big slaughterhouses have all of that sludge and nastiness, they have these big, huge ponds filled with, I can't even explain it, but it's so much bacteria that the water is pink, right? And where can you put it? What do you do with this? One of the things that they use it for is to spray some of our food. And it's like a natural fertilizer type thing. Absolutely disgusting. Hearing it come out of a farmer's mouth made it even worse. So again, why is the E. coli, this is my opinion, not fact. I am not a scientist, but my opinion based on the knowledge that I have and things that I've been told. The reason why this E. coli superbug gene is resistant to every antibiotic is because half of our food is pumped up with antibiotics. Our meats, our chickens, our beefs, our pigs, whatever you're eating is pumped up with antibiotics in the first place. So once it gets on your plate, you already immune to stuff that shouldn't be in your body Long story short, be mindful of the food you eat. We had a speaker in the building yesterday who talked about this. We don't have control over our food anymore. And Farrakhan even spoke about this. How do we, Minister Louis Farrakhan, I don't want anybody to think I'm being disrespectful, spoke about how you eat in seedless things, wondering why you can't reproduce. Like, you are what you eat. And if we're over here eating what is a seedless grape? How do they reproduce seedless grapes? How do you have an organic seedless grape? That doesn't make common sense. How do you have an organic seedless watermelon? I ain't seen a watermelon with black pits in years. No matter what store you go to, health food store, I ain't seen it. You seen it? Because I haven't. Even the minister said it. You are what you eat. And when you over here eating nonsense, that's exactly what that's what you're putting into your body. Your life lasts depending on what you put into it. Every single last one of your cells regenerates. Every cell in your body. From your brain to your skin to your organs, everything dies and rebuilds based on what you feed it. What are the military UN trucks doing in Virginia? Motorists spot white combat vehicles on the interstate. UN tactical vehicles have been spotted in Virginia driving on the interstate. Motorists have been posting pictures online, sparking debate about them. One website asked if the UN is preparing an economic collapse here in America. And I want to go back to my baby with that suicide note. They said they can't confirm nor deny that note exists, but the story that was told, I reached out to them and they said, listen, it's a real thing. Snoops try to discredit us. They never even contacted us. They don't know what we have. They didn't ask us any questions. They just went ahead and said, oh, that's fake. That's false. I gave up on Snoops. I gave up on Snoops a long time ago. We currently have a caller on the line. Good rising caller, you're live.
Good morning, Tayla. How are you?
Hey, hello, darling. How are you?
Good. So just a couple of things.
He's going to speak on E. coli.
You get seedless grapes and seedless watermelon by genetically altering through natural selection. What you do is you start growing watermelons, and then you find watermelons that have less seeds than others. You start breeding off those seeds, and you start with a stalk, and then you strain them out into in and genetically manipulate the seed. You don't have to do any of that. All you have to do is just plant, watch, and keep growing the crops in the style that you want. Mendel Gregor in the 1800s, he was a monk, and he taught us how to do this with bean plants. That's how you get the genetic square, and you can predict genetic outcome through various breeding. For the E. coli is naturally found in fecal material. Fecal material has been used as fertilizer on the time when we started raising our own crops. So to have a slurry pool, which is basically where you liquefied whatever fecal material you're going to use, whether that's from cows, horses, pigs, even humans at one point, and to put that back into the ground, the plants need the nitrogen, the ground needs the nitrogen in order to provide vitamins for the plants to grow and propagate in a proper fashion. I'm not saying that spraying your plants with this material once they've gotten to a mature level, as opposed to groundwater leaching. That's like a soaker hose that goes down the row of vegetables, and it presents a constant drip of nutrients to the plant. I mean, you can do it either way. It's probably much safer to do it through a drip hose as opposed to just rolling through the field with a big tank and spraying it. I mean, spraying it, that's how you get to it gets on your lettuce and your spinach. And you're absolutely right. We feed way too many antibiotics to animals because it's on they get more money for an animal the heavier they are. They get heavier quicker by feeding them antibiotics and not letting a natural disease process weed out, what would be considered more of an unfit food source. So they feed them antibiotics so they get a higher rate of return. That's not right, and it has absolutely helped us land in the position that we are right now with antibiotic resistance.
Thank you so much for the truth. I promise to tell the truth. I knew you were going to call about the antibiotics. I knew it, though. But thank you for your science expertise. And I don't care, natural selection or not. Natural selection in the past 20 years would not have bred. There's not one black seed. Not one black seed. So they're either really, really good at their job or really, really good. I don't know the answer, Sway. I just know I miss watermelons with the seeds. Creamy with the seeds. I miss it. I've been drinking watermelon. Love and appreciate you. Hope you have an awesome day today. Really quickly, I told you guys we made international news. We certainly did. Headmaster quits in the race scandal at America's oldest public school after 2 black students make a video exposing the racist abuse. I want to say shout out to those babies. Thank you so much for coming forth. And now there's a movement and a conversation that should have been happening a long time ago. Really quickly, slush funds to pay personal consultant. Do you remember Huma? Do you remember when Lionel Media was talking about Huma and Hillary Clinton? So yes, and yes, Hillary Clinton was paying her personal consultant, Huma, who is, what's the name? Andrew Weiner? Is that his last name? Weiner, the one who was taking pictures of his wiener? Yeah, that's her husband. Also, Hillary Clinton spent $34,000 a night in the Caribbean for a holiday for her daughter Chelsea and payoffs to silence Bill's ex-sex accusers. How Hillary has used donations to the Clinton Foundation as her personal piggy bank. I'm not even going to say no more, baby. I'm going to leave that right there. You can do with it what you wish. Leave it alone. Leave it alone. Really quickly, join city councilors Ayanna Presley and Andrea Campbell and community activist Leroy Peoples, Tina Cherry, and William Morales for the Determined Divas Luncheon Dialogue on Public Safety. Shout out to Union Capital and FII. This is Saturday, July 9th at 11 a.m. at the Boiling Building. The topic is public safety. FII determined Bieber's civic engagement dialogue series. This is going to be an awesome event Saturday, July 9th, 2016 from 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. at the Bruce Boiling Building. Please show up and show out. And if you have any concerns, these are the places that you need to show up. You have to be in these spaces. And I said it once, I'll say it twice, I'll always say it. It doesn't matter if you show up at the last moment. Show up. Show up. 99% is about just showing up. Be mindful and try to be on time, because that's one of the things I'm working on. A New York doctor, 28 years old, is jailed for 17 years after admitting he sexually abused an 11-year-old girl he met in a chat room for 6 years. I don't care. Why are we have people in jail for non-violent offenses that are doing more than 17 years, and you think it's acceptable for 17 years after you sexually abuse a child? As a parent, we need to be stricter on our sex abuse laws, especially when it comes to children. It should carry a minimum of 25 years. If you have a gun on your person, there's a minimum weight. There's a minimum sentence. If a gun, and then what's a bullet? A bullet's another 5 years, right? Every bullet is another 5 years. Why do we not have this same ideology when it comes to sexual abuse? We sit here and say that we protect our children, we love our children, we protect our women, we love our women, but our laws don't say that at all. You guys remember the prostitute, the 18-year-old, or at the time she was 17, who slept with 32 police officers? Well, she's claiming that officers are still asking her to have sex, and she reveals that she would have kept she would have sat there, she wouldn't have snitched. She said, I don't know why they snitched, because I certainly wouldn't have. Lord have mercy. I think it's hilarious. I'm sorry, it's not funny, but I do believe that it is hilarious. Really quickly, I'm going to take this call, and then we're going to get into Power Hour, because I cannot wait to speak to our guest. Good rising, caller, you're live.
Good morning, good rising.
Good rising, my king. How are you?
The reason the laws are placed like that because they make with the pedophiles, they get off easy because it's a white person's crime. And the gun laws is mostly black people, so they're sticking the laws on the black people and writing the laws on the white people. That's basically what's going on. And you just have to keep talking about it so you can change it.
Well, then, baby, I'm just going to keep on talking. We just going to keep on talking about it. And I want to remind you guys, back when we had the Body and Soul interview, one of the things Mr. Nubian called in and was just like, you know, you got all these white liberals on the line talking about this and talking about that. What they need to do is go talk to their brothers, their cousins, their fathers, their sons, because that's the one who's, you know, perpetuating this crime. And I'm like, damn, Mr. Nubian, that's a little harsh. And then they're like, no, Tayla, it's true. You know, the face of sex trafficking and the face of sexual assault, most sexual assaults are little black faces with old white men. And that's coming out of the horse's mouth. That's coming based off the statistics. So we're gonna keep talking about it. We're gonna be mindful of it. 17 years, I'm good. I'm good. You should have got a minimum of 25. A minimum. Thank you, baby. Love and appreciate you. Hope you have an amazing day today. Today is the day that the Lord had made. I am rejoiced and so glad in it. Do you know who David Johns is? Oh my goodness, he is absolutely amazing. So you guys remember when I was not here for my birthday and I was in New York and I attended the Coalition of Schools Educating Boys of Color? One of the speakers was David Johns. He is the executive director of the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. And he spoke, his thing is #TeachTheBabies. And he definitely is out here fighting for our children and teaching those babies. And I love seeing him at these conferences or at speaking engagements. And he'll just have a random child in his hand. And I think it's absolutely amazing. And this is, you know, it goes back to the village and teaching and loving in a village fashion, in that mindset. That's who we are. That's what our DNA knows. David Johns, good rising, my king. How are you?
Good
Good morning. I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm super fantastic. I have to tell you, you are so beautiful of a soul and so magnificent, David. I love you. I love your work, and I love your hashtag Teach the Babies, because that's exactly what we need to do in order for us to advance the way that we want to.
I appreciate all of that and the work that you do to ensure that we have a platform to talk about the things that are most important in our community, including the need to support everyone's child as if they are our own.
Absolutely. So right now we know that you are the executive director of the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. But who is David Johns prior to being in the cabinet of the White House?
That's a good question. I think anyone who knows me knows that I'm and have been passionate about education and specifically leveraging my privilege and position and time, talent, and treasure to increase access to high quality learning and development opportunities, the kinds of experiences that allow people to understand and then pursue their passion in ways that I've been supported to do for myself. And so while the role that I'm in now is one that comes with the additional support that our president, Barack Obama, provides, the work of being in spaces where I can be helpful to otherwise support and help to make space for young people to demonstrate their genius is something that I've done over the course of my lifetime.
And you said, you made mention to your privilege in your platform. What is your privilege?
I am a Black man in a society where intersectionality often means that I have privileges based on my gender that you as a Black woman might not have, given the way that race and sexuality commingle in our society. I have 2 Ivy League degrees in a world where access to post-secondary education means that there are spaces and language and power that I have access to that other people in my community who look like me or who come from the communities like Inglewood, California, the one that nurtured me, don't have access to. The converse of that is as a Black gay man or a man who comes from a non-nuclear family raised by a single mom, there are spaces in which I don't have privilege or privileges that other people have. And I say that simply because it's important for us, one, to name the things we have access to also be clear about naming the systems and barriers, things like institutional racism. A conversation I had last night with more than 400 student members of the National Education Association kicked off their regional assembly meeting while having a 3-hour session on institutional racism. It's important for us to be able to name those things as we think about the work required to overcome, disrupt, and otherwise supplant these barriers that often end up serving as obstacles to young people, one, demonstrating the genius that exists naturally within them, and then 2, overcoming the barriers that are, again, otherwise erected because we live in a country where race and racism and sex and sexuality and religion and status more generally is associated with those social constructs have very significant meaning.
Thank you so much for breaking that down. As the executive director of the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans, that's a mouthful, but what does it actually mean, and what is it that you actually do?
Yeah, really good question, and I appreciate you using the full title. I often am asked to shorten it or offer an acronym, and I'm especially loath to do so given the fact that it is very rare that we hear that sequence of words strung together, in particular educational excellence associated with African Americans. And I mean, we use that term, but it is an umbrella term that is encompassing of all of the diversity that exists within the diaspora. So 2 points I think are worth making. One, the initiative that I have the pleasure of leading is one that was created by our president, Barack Obama, by executive order. It is the only initiative that he established, but we complement 5 other, again, previously existing initiatives, the eldest of which is the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities, an initiative that was established under President Carter and has continued in perpetuity since then, regardless of party and political power. There are also, again, prior to this initiative, having been established initiatives focused on educational excellence for Hispanics, Native American, Alaska Native and Native Hawaiians, Asian American, Pacific Islanders, as well as one focused on neighborhood faith-based partnerships. And again, each of those existed before this administration, but what also existed before this administration is the sad reality that while a child's zip code in this country is still predicted by genetic code or zip code, when we look at most quality of life indicator ladders, right, the things that tell us the opportunities and challenges that one will experience based on physiological or biological markers. When we look at those ladders, African American students are often disproportionately and have historically been at the lowest rungs of those ladders. And so the president established this initiative to ensure that there was an intentional and unapologetic federal focus on leveraging resources to close opportunity gaps and achievement gaps. So one might ask, how do we do that? We focus our time, energy, and resources on 3 specific things. One is giving platforms to those who are impacted by the decisions that we make, we as adults, we those of us in the federal government, we those of us who are educators, we give platforms to those who are impacted by the decisions that we make to talk about that experience, to make recommendations for ways that we can improve programs, policies, and practices designed to benefit them. Specifically, I hate going into spaces where adults gather with other adults to talk about solutions for students, and students are conspicuously absent. We do this funny thing where we gather with each other and try and recall what it was like when we were in school, and then design solutions based on what we think we might need. And then we implement them often without ever engaging young people in a conversation about their reality. And so we partner with Johnson Publishing Company, Ebony Magazine, to produce what we call ASAM Ed Summits. They are often at post-secondary institutions throughout the country, 2-year, 4-year colleges and universities. And the one concrete rule that is non-negotiable for us is that the only experts who get to sit on the stage in front of the White House field are students themselves, Black students who get to be celebrated for their experiences and who get to be put in a position where they get to make recommendations, again, for the things that we all need to do collectively, not just educators, but the caring and concern of those responsible for loving and supporting the learning of kids, none of whom have to be here, and to ensure that they feel safe, engaged, and supported. The second thing we do is to highlight proven programs, policies, and strategies that are working, again, to support the cognitive, social, and emotional development of Black kids, acknowledging that we have to attend to all of their needs. And we do that in a variety of ways, including by leveraging technology, honoring that, more than 80% of Americans are on 2 or more social media platforms, African Americans in particular, leveraging our creative genius, what Jesse Williams spoke about so very eloquently at the BET Awards and every other platform that he's been given heretofore. And so we host things like bi-monthly AFAM Ed Twitter chats where we can leverage technology to share information and resources about things that we know that are working, and that really allow caring and concerned adults to see and understand opportunities and resources to be engaged in this work. And then the last thing, which references the space where we were able to engage most recently at the Conference for the Coalition of Schools Educating Boys of Color, run by the phenomenal Ron Walker
Yes.
of Massachusetts. We support a national and to some extent international network of individuals and organizations who are committed to this work. And a lot of what we do is, fill gaps. We find ways to translate information to connect people who like-minded and who are working in similar spaces, and otherwise, again, leverage our position within the federal government to be helpful to those who are doing the work of supporting our babies.
David, I just fell in love with you even more than I was prior. We have a really quick question because currently we're on YouTube and Facebook Live. One of the questions that came off of Facebook was, we've been having conversation about status and about race, and you even right now talking about education mentioned Native Americans, Blacks, and African Americans. What is the difference in those three statuses, and how do you what is the conversation in the White House about those three individual races as far as Native American, Black, and African American? And somebody asked if you could break down the term, what exactly is an African American?
Yeah, so two things. One is while we talk about things in fixed categories, there's a lot of fluidity that should be acknowledged, and there are many of us who show up in the intersections, right? So we talk, actually, if there were three categories, I would identify them as African American, Latino, or Hispanic, and then Native American. But want to honor that there are some of us who show up in each of those spaces who are Afro-Latinos with Native American ancestry and the like. And so when we use the term African American, we also use the term Black. We use it to refer to any descendant of the African diaspora, acknowledging that many of us can, whether literally or figuratively, trace our ancestry to the continent of Africa, and simply got off at different stops along the boat during the transatlantic slave trade. And so acknowledging again that that's the way that we use that classification, and it sometimes means that we have conversations with our brothers and sisters for whom English is their second language, but it also refers to those of us for whom the experience of enslavement is a very critical piece of our collective history. To be sure, it is not the beginning, it is not the end. Enslavement was something that is significant, but should never be presumed to be, again, the beginning and or anything in that regard with regard to our history. When we talk specifically about challenges and opportunities to leverage federal resources to make a difference, we have to acknowledge that there's power in precision. And so I talked earlier about the fact that African Americans are often at the lowest rung of most quality of life indicator ladders. Our brothers and sisters who are Native Americans, who for whom this is our country before it became the United States of America was their land. Individuals who continue to live on tribal lands and sovereign nations, again connected to Native American ancestry, face some challenges that are often rendered invisible. I probably should have started by celebrating the resilience that comes with their history and culture. But suffice to say that there are significant challenges with regard to access to meaningful educational opportunities. There's a lot of work happening around preserving, restoring, and reclaiming Native American languages and histories and cultures, knowing that kids who know who they are and who they are
he's giving you out the secrets right now.
All respect. And so there's a separate initiative that focuses on opportunities to support Native Americans. And again, we work very closely together to ensure that we are mindful of the ways in which we can leverage the power and precision, but also work collectively.
He's answering it though. He's answering. So all right. So our Facebook Live is going crazy right now because David, I'm gonna just be honest. They want you to say. They said don't sidestep it, don't tippy toe around it. People are wanting to know whether or not there is an initiative in the White House for Native Americans to claim their space, to claim their land, and to reclaim what is rightfully theirs. And many of us here in the United States who believe that we are African American are actually indigenous Americans that have been quote unquote brainwashed to believe that we may have came from Africa, when many of us were right here in this country before it was established as a country.
I think that is right for some of us who, right, for example, I have family who are Pequot Indian who can trace their lineage to Connecticut, right? That is definitely true for some of us. I do also think that there is a way in which we engage in popular conversation about imagining things, and there's a tendency to also claim heritages that don't necessarily exist. So I don't want to overstate the extent to which many of us show up in, again, intersectional ways or have multiple identities. But separate and apart from that, yes, there is a White House initiative on American Indian and Alaska Native education, and they work to ensure that, among other things, the federal government honors the sovereignty
I got you.
that
In DC, I got you.
and that is owed to Native American tribes and land. And the work that initiative does is one that honors all that is embedded in that question, but that again speaks to unique opportunities to engage with, to learn from, and to otherwise support Native American communities.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. Another question that's coming from Facebook Live. You guys can give us a call. I want to acknowledge caller on line 1-617-282-0062. We are currently on the line with David Johns. David Johns is the executive director of the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. The question coming out of Facebook Live is about the conference in DC. And if you could speak a little bit more on the conference of DC, and as well, if you could speak on the conference at Colesbach, the Coalition of Schools Educating Boys of Color, and just speak on, these initiatives and what they mean to you and what they should mean to us.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Three things. I mentioned, again, the partnership with Johnson Publishing Company, Ebony Magazine, to produce what we call AFAM Ed Summit. You can learn more about them at our website, www.ed.gov/AFAM, and then the full word education is the abbreviation for AFAM, for African American Education. And those summits allow us to ask students one critical question. No matter where we go, we ask students, what do you need so that you and your peers feel and are safe, engaged, and supported?
Okay, but he said three things, so we'll see if he
that is provided no matter where we are and who we're engaging is.
Say that last part again.
Everywhere we go, we ask all students, high school, elementary, college, non-traditional age, traditional age, what do you need to feel and be safe, engaged, and supported?
What about the special education? Because I didn't hear you speak on the special education piece.
I'll get to that too, but what do you think is, and this is students who are special ed as well, what do you think that they say they need to feel and be safe, engaged, and supported?
I would have to say educators that care about them.
That's very much related to it, extremely close. The thing that they say they need is love.
Oh, see, that was the first thing that popped in my mind, but I bit my tongue. It was like, teachers that care. But it's love.
Part of it, right? Yes, acknowledging that, again, adults who aren't teachers have an opportunity and an obligation to care too, right? And so it's about collective impact. And so we spend time hosting these summits to, again, highlight the need for all of us to find some way to show up in the life of a young person. And so while all of us are not uniquely suited to be classroom teachers, right? Educators do God's work. It is an incredibly difficult job. People sometimes say silly things like teaching isn't rocket science, and they're right. It is a lot harder. I have NASA scientists, rocket scientists who have said that on record, but there are opportunities for all of us to show up. Yesterday, I mentioned to the point of the question about the summit in DC, I kicked off the regional assembly for the National Education Association student members, so 400 college students who have already taken steps to pursue a career in education and who have joined the membership of the National Education Association. The NEA has committed to leading in both conversations about it and work required to address institutional racism, the barriers that often show up for kids in schools, right? And so we had a 2.5-hour discussion last night that included me actually holding someone's child, a little young man named Nate. And I just posted a picture of the two of us on the stage on my Instagram feed at Mr. David John. But again, allowing us to work through unpacking bias and providing each other with tools so that we can be allies, be disruptive about the policies and programs and practices that, again, serve to derail or otherwise make it difficult for students to demonstrate their genius. Cosbach is an organization that is committed to supporting schools and leaders of schools and institutions that support boys and men of color. It is an organization that is incredibly important, one that is aligned with President Obama's investment in supporting boys and men of color, specifically through the My Brother's Keeper initiative. And again, it's a way for us to be mindful of the fact that there's power and precision. There are challenges that are unique to the experiences of boys and men of color. But it is important to understand and underscore that that is not ever to be assumed to be at the detriment of or in lieu of doing the work required to support our sisters. And so while I often talk about the My Brother's Keeper initiative, I equally spend time talking about the White House Council on Women and Girls, the fact that we, the Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans, has an initiative called AFAM Women Lead to highlight opportunities to, again, support the specific needs of Black women and girls. But those are all examples of the ways in which we work collectively together at events, through summits and other opportunities to, again, do the work that we know that is so important. To your question about students with disabilities, in the month of July, on the 26th, which is the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, we will be hosting a summit at the U.S. Department of Education to highlight opportunities to ensure educational excellence for individuals with disabilities. We spend a lot of time shining a bright light on the parts of our communities that are often neglected and ignored. And so on the 26th of July, we will be hosting a summit where the invitees are African American students with disabilities, their counselors, those who are responsible with ensuring that they have post-secondary plans and the support needed to thrive not only in school and in life. And again, we'll do that with an eye towards celebrating the contributions that African Americans with disabilities have made over time. That is consistent with our practice and the way that we do our work. Another example would be that this month, June 9th through the 11th, the Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans partnered with the NEA again and the NBJC, the National Black Justice Coalition, an organization run by Sharon Letman Hicks. It is the organization that is responsible for the intersections of civil rights for African Americans as well as LGBTQ rights. And so we work together collectively to host a first of its kind convening a White House summit focused on African American, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning youth. And so we provided a safe space where more than 100, again, Black, queer youth from across the country, from as far away as California, from Minnesota, Ohio, Illinois, New York, Georgia, Washington, D.C., from across the country came together to, one, celebrate the power in their uniqueness, two, to make recommendations for the things that practitioners, teachers, and school leaders need to do so that they again feel safe, engaged, and supported, and to really talk about the opportunities that exist for us to support students who, absent these conversations and the work required, are otherwise not supported in ways that they deserve. And so those, again, are just examples of the way that we do this work and seek to support organizations committed to the cognitive, social, and emotional development of our young people.
Thank you so much. Really quick question while we're still speaking on the summit. We have an amazing urban autism organization here in Boston that works with putting the word out there that, you know, special needs and disabilities are a problem in our community that they're never heard. People bypass them. Our children never get any special attention. Is there a way for those individuals that are here in Boston or who are listening nationwide that want to be a part of that summit, that want to be a part of that conversation in July? You said 25th or 26th?
26th, the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
How can we get involved? How can we register? How can we be in that space?
Yeah, check our website at www.ed.gov/AFAM Education or follow us on Twitter at AFAM Education for all information regarding any of the summits that I've mentioned.
Thank you so much. And before we take this caller on the line, 617-282-0062, a question came in whether or not my brother's keeper will ever receive funding.
Before I do that, really quickly want to highlight the work of my colleagues in the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, OSERS, at the Department of Education. They do a lot of work for individuals with disabilities, including some recent guidance to ensure that we address the disproportionate rate at which African-American students are often over-identified, sometimes inappropriately identified for special education. So encourage everybody to leverage their resources. You can find that at ed.gov/OSERS. So My Brother's Keeper as an initiative was established by President Obama to leverage, again, his bully pulpit and federal resources to identify opportunities to close gaps. There is a public corollary to the federal My Brother's Keeper initiative called the My Brother's Keeper Alliance. It is a public or private, rather, to the extent that My Brother's Keeper, the initiative, is public. It is a private entity. It is run by the former head of Accenture. It is based in New York, and they are doing the work of coordinating with the F11, the foundation, including California Endowment, run by Bob Ross, who again is another member of our President's Advisory Commission, the Open Society Foundation, Ford Foundation, and many others. They are doing the work of coordinating resources to invest in communities that are doing this work. Separate but related to that, there are a number of communities who have signed on to the My Brother's Keeper City Challenge. That is one in which mayors and other local elected officials have taken a pledge to do a set of activities around convening leaders in a community to do an assessment of what kind of work can be done to support boys and men of color. The expectation, again, is that
break down what, Ms. G? What do you want him to break down?
Be supported by organizations that are engaged in this space, including Policy Link, who's providing a lot of technical assistance to communities to be able to do this kind of work. That's run by Angela Butler Blackwell, again, another member of our community. So again, important to make the distinction between the public My Brother's Keeper initiative and the private My Brother's Keeper Alliance, and the ways in which they will continue to work together once this administration transitions.
Thank you so much. For those that are just now tuning in, Big City 101.3 FM, Waking Up with Tayla Andre, Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. to 7. We are currently on the line with David Johns, an executive director of the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. We are talking about education. We're talking about special needs. We're talking about everything that has to do with hashtag Teach the Babies. I want to give a huge shout out to our sponsors, ZC Boston, half price sushi on the weekends, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m., free parking, free delivery, buck a shuck, $1 oysters for the first dozen, 3-mile radius. Listen, the food is absolutely amazing. They deliver until 1 a.m. They deliver all the way up Blue Hill Ave until it meets Columbia Road, and they deliver until 1 o'clock in the morning. I don't think I need to say anything else. Shout out to Faith's Natural Beauty. I did a face mask yesterday. My skin feels oh so amazing. Make sure you get those summer beauty products, and when you buy online, you get free samples. Faith's Naturals Beauty.com, and make sure you get your David Banner tickets July 23rd at the Strand Theater. David Banner is going to be here to discuss 350 years of Boston's racial inequality. Are you ready? Because I'm ready. We currently have a caller on the line. Good rising, caller, you're live.
Good morning, Taylor.
Hey, how are you, T. Michael Thomas? You're currently on the line with David Johns. What do you want to say, baby?
Well, not going to criticize or I'm not going to diss, but what I am here to do is to challenge. And what I challenge is to have sit down with all the leaders, all the message carriers, all the everyone, sit down, and the People's Academy will present the training, manufacturing, and job creation, and have a conversation on if folks are serious about the messages carrying, let's sit down and have a real conversation on how it will benefit the Commonwealth, the folks in the Commonwealth. So if everyone is serious about their saying, sit down with T. Michael Thomas and the People's Academy and see our plan to create jobs, training, and manufacturing.
So, T. Michael Thomas, right now, David Johns has no idea what you're in reference to or what you're talking about. So, really quickly, what I would like to say is, Mr. Johns, T. Michael Thomas runs the People's Academy here in Boston. He has been met with great opposition towards his goal, and his goal is to simply educate our boys of color. He has a sheet metal business that has been featured on Marvel Mather, the History Channel show, and his work is awesome. He trains children or youth or those that may have been anybody who's interested. He trains them on sheet metal work, and he's been offered money, like real money, to do this work outside of the community, but he refuses to leave Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan. He refuses to leave out our people of color. And because of that, he cannot get funding. He cannot get a building. And I have been on T. Michael's side since the beginning. His work is absolutely amazing. He has accolades out the woozah, and he still can't get funding simply because he refuses to leave our community. So what he's saying is, you know, and I would love because you're in that space, to challenge everybody. Why don't we have more technical schools? Why don't we have more technical training? Why aren't there more partnerships with schools and organizations that are out here doing the work, doing that grassroots? But yet there's a disconnect between establishment and organization. So I'm going to give you time to go ahead and speak on that.
Yeah, I'll just say to the extent that was that for me, Taylor?
Yes.
Before I did this work referencing past lives, I had the honor of serving Senator Ted Kennedy while he was the senior senator from Massachusetts, and I worked for him on the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. And we did a lot of work in Boston in particular, but in the communities that you mentioned, to ensure that the Workforce Investment Act, the federal system that provides funding primarily through the Department of Labor, but that is responsible for supporting the relationship between labor organizations and providers. And it sounds like that's what we're talking about with educators, to ensure that individuals have opportunities to acquire the skills, credentials, and experiences needed to be successful, happens within regional economies. And so I would love to do some work offline after this call to figure out how to connect some of those dots, as the federal government does make investments that are supposed to be supporting the types of things that we're describing.
Thank you so much for that. T. Michael Thomas, I currently do not have you pulled up. What I will do is connect you to via email so that moving forward, maybe we can see some initiatives coming out of that. But maybe we had to go to the federal level in order for the state and city to react. So thank you, David, for just that offer. David, do we have you? I just want to say thank you for that offer.
No, of course. Yeah, and again, it's the Workforce Investment Act. There are local workforce investment boards. I would call the state labor department and ask questions about membership and investment.
Thank you so much, T. Michael Thomas. I hope you got that. If not, we are currently on Facebook and YouTube. Just rewind just a little bit. Again, for those that are currently listening, we are live with David Johns, the Executive Director of the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. If you have any questions, please give us a call, 617-282-0062. Again, that number is 617-282-0062. Can you, really quickly, can you actually speak on the work that you did with Mr. Ted Kennedy? Can you speak on that work and maybe some of those initiatives that rolled out and what that meant for Massachusetts and how that then played a role on the national level?
Yeah, so I began my career in Washington, D.C. as a fellow with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. I worked in the office of Congressman Charlie Rangel from New York and had the opportunity to really understand how it is that ideas become codified in the law, right? Really, you know, how it is that that old schoolhouse rock song about a bill sitting on Capitol Hill actually works today. And after serving as a fellow with the CBCF in Congressman Rangel's office, was provided with an opportunity to learn policy making and about the federal government at the knee of one of the greatest legislators who has ever lived, Senator Ted Kennedy. And so I served as, again, a senior policy advisor on the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. It was a committee chaired by, and wonderfully so, Senator Kennedy until he passed away. And it is also the committee that is responsible for, at a minimum, 40% of the legislation, on average, rather, 40% of the legislation introduced in any given Congress. And its purview means that the committee is responsible for crafting policies that impact everything from healthcare, the Improving American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which had significant implications with regard to the Affordable Care Act. Is an example of that. One of the first pieces of legislation that I worked on was the Improving Head Start for School Readiness Act of 2007. The more recently reauthorized Ensuring Every Student Succeeds Act, which reauthorized No Child Left Behind, which reauthorized the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 65 before it. Again, examples of bills that were produced by that committee. Two related points on this matter. One, Senator Kennedy was masterful at always advocating for the needs of individuals in Massachusetts, and in particular, leveraging federal resources to address equity, to ensure equity, rather, to address inequity. At the time that I was on Capitol Hill, there were individuals, Sherry Killens was the commissioner who was responsible for early learning in the state of Massachusetts. Massachusetts has been, and in some regards continues to be, an exemplar for the kinds of ways that we can leverage federal resources in order to improve the lives of individuals and communities. To the point of the conversation we were just having, the Workforce Investment Act is a bill that was also recently reauthorized. It's now the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act. But that was something that in part was designed to highlight the way in which the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, like the state of Washington, as well as the state of Iowa, have been working better together to break down the silos that sometimes otherwise exist. And so specifically in this context, it's about getting the Department of Labor and the Department of Education and the systems that they've been influenced to work better together to find ways to ensure that individuals can access pathways where they can receive the skills, credentials, and experiences needed to either get a good job or become an entrepreneur. And again, otherwise find ways to be self-sustaining and show up and contribute to society in all shapes, forms, and fashions.
Absolutely. We have another caller on the line, 617-282-0062. Good rising, caller, you're live. Oh, I don't know what that was. Baby, you might need a new phone. No, not you. Good rising, caller, you're live. Is it you, Mr. Nubian? Is that you?
Yes, ma'am.
Good rising, how are you?
I'm doing good. I noticed in the conversation, there's a lot
lot of programs about educating our children, but here's the dilemma. It's the hiring practice. I don't care if it's from the NFL coach to the getting them to get the electrical junior job. It's just when it comes to hiring, that's the disconnect. We have tons of educated NBA folks in our community, but when you look at the employment, that's where it's a dilemma. Look at Obama's administration. He's the first African American president, but yet his staff is like what 80% European white male or white women. So I mean, isn't that kind of contradictory and counterproductive for him to have these initiatives to educate people if he himself won't hire?
David, is that a true statistic as far as the administration is concerned?
I couldn't hear anything that the caller said.
So what he made mention to is, while we're over here talking about education, we have to make mention that it's about hiring practices. We don't have any people of color standing in the front of the room. We don't have any people of color teaching our boys, black and brown children, whether it's the coach or whether it's the principal or whether it's the teacher itself. We don't have enough representation at the front, and we have to be mindful of our hiring practices. And he said that the first black president has like a 75% Caucasian staff. And I wanted to know whether or not those were true statistics or what his staff makeup really is.
No, again, we're conflating things. I don't have the exact numbers, but I do know that this administration is the most diverse administration in history, period, full stop. This administration is committed to highlighting, celebrating, and otherwise supporting diversity, period, full stop. An example of that would be that the U.S. Department of Education recently hosted a summit in LBJ to talk about workforce diversity, a convening of, again, individuals, system leaders, a brother, Sharif El-Mekki, who is a principal in Philadelphia, who runs the Black Male Educator Network, is an example of somebody who was engaged in this. And the focus there was really to honor a part of what was said that is true, which is that the diversity in our classrooms and schools with regard to our teachers and leaders does not reflect the diversity that exists within the student population. And so the reality is that, yes, less than 2% of our K-12 teaching and leading workforce looks like me. I taught kindergarten and third grade in Harlem, New York. And it is rare to run into black male elementary educators, right? But I don't want to obfuscate, move past, or otherwise minimize the role that diverse teachers and including black men play in schools throughout the country, period. And so we are working as an initiative to connect with and support, again, those networks that exist in Philadelphia and Chicago and California and other non-metropolitan spaces to, again, celebrate, recruit, retain, and support diverse educators, because there's, again, so much work to do in this regard. One more thing that I think is important to say in this context: sometimes we have this conversation and it becomes about the need for, in this case, black kids to see other black folks conspiring for their success, and that's important. But it's also important for non-kids of color struggling to not use the word minority, because technically those who are referred to as minorities are
the majority.
The vast majority of kids in the public school system today are what we continue to refer to improperly as racial and ethnic minorities, right? But the work of ensuring that all children see diverse individuals, black, white, Asian, Pacific, American, Islander, able-bodied, disabled, LGBTQ and allied and hetero, like all of that, kids need to see everybody conspiring for their success. And that is something that benefits kids of color, kids not from racial and ethnic backgrounds. And one of the things that we do is host AFAN Ed Films. This is Screening and Discussion Series. It's a partnership with the Motion Picture Association of America and Aspire TV, the network that is owned by Magic Johnson. We screen films that are positive in nature and otherwise highlight opportunities to do the work of supporting our children. One of the films that we recently screened was 3.5 minutes, 10 Bullets. It's a film about the murder of Jordan Davis, the young African-American man who was shot in a gas station parking lot in Florida because his music was too out and a privileged white man demanded that he turn it down. The thing that I will go to my grave grappling with is the understanding that if Michael Dunn, the man who shot Jordan Davis, ever had a black male educator who he experienced conspiring to love him, to support him, to affirm him, that interaction would have been very different in that parking lot that day. And so we, as a nation, one that is founded upon principles of diversity, one that has been as strong and as powerful as we have been because of the diversity that exists throughout every single community throughout our country, need to do a better job of celebrating and supporting diversity in every way, including in the teachers and leaders responsible for the learning and development of all of our babies.
David! Woo! That's exactly what we needed to hear, and I think that you are absolutely right. Had he had an educator that invested in and loved him, he may have seen him a little differently, Jordan a little differently, because when you have that diversity and you understand the culture, you understand the people, you have that sympathy, that empathy, that you have that connection. Really quickly, as far as here in Boston is concerned, we've made international news. One of the oldest schools, the oldest school in America's history, is in international news for racial slurs. And, you know, the headmaster stepped down, and right now the girls are really strong in the media about what's going on in our schools. Black at BLS is now hashtag Black at BPS, which is Boston Public Schools. What do you think we should do, can do here in Boston that may need to be looked at nationwide to instill racial equity in our schools?
I think three things are important pieces of the strategy that's required to accomplish that goal. One is to provide platforms and a safe space for young people to talk about their experience, right? So again, often we as adults will debate and sometimes do it in ways that are seemingly flippant, whether or not Black Lives Matter, right? But the question is, do we provide opportunities for kids who are young, gifted, and Black to talk about what it's like to be all of those things at a point in time in which we are debating their very humanity, or whether or not they have the right to breathe, to buy Skittles and iced tea, to drive a car, or to otherwise play in a park or show up and be Black, right? And so I talk a lot about our summits. If you go to our website, you can download what we call a teaching toolkit, and it provides you with every resource that we think one needs in order to create, again, the safe space where young people can talk about their experience, speak full truth to power, and to make recommendations for the things that we as adults need to do for them to show up in the ways that we expect for them to show up both now and in the future.
And what is that website really quickly?
www.ed.gov/AFAMEDUCATION, or just Google White House Initiative Educational Excellence for African Americans, or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all a version of either AFAM Education or official AFAM Ed. And so again, that's the first thing. Download the toolkit, provide an opportunity for young folks to be celebrated, affirmed, and to be at the center of shaping and co-constructing educational opportunities or opportunities to otherwise address equity. The second thing we can do is, consistent with some of the conversation we've had, is learn from and create spaces for community leaders, individuals who have done the work of supporting the learning and development of African American students, to be able to talk about what we need to be doing, and to be supported in doing that work, right? So this is, again, related to the way in which the My Brother's Keeper initiative highlights things that we all know work. For example, mentoring, showing up in the lives of young people, ending chronic absenteeism to ensure that kids are in school every day on time so that they can develop the skills they need and demonstrate how brilliant they are. All of that, highlights shared knowledge, but also is very much about appreciating that the dynamics in Dorchester might be dissimilar from what's going on in Memphis, Tennessee, in ways that require us to approach the problem a little differently. And then I think the third thing is for us to be honest about the work required to heal and to deal with the trauma that is often associated with being Black in America or Black and poor in America. What often happens for me is that we sometimes simply focus on ensuring that kids can add and subtract and read, but we miss the importance of ensuring that they are whole, happy, and healthy. So I spent a lot of time, and again, I'm reminded of this in kindergarten, ensuring that we take care of ourselves and of one another. So what does that mean? That means that we have to name the things that ail us and that hurt us. We have to talk about the role of race and racism and poverty in our country. We have to be clear that while we sometimes make jokes about people that are poor, that there are physiological implications to being in spaces where you don't have the resources needed to simply survive, right? That existing as a poor person and a poor racialized person in this country is tantamount to walking with and being sleep deprived every day of your life, right? And that does something to you. We spend time now celebrating that, kids, Black kids in particular, poor kids in particular, dreamers, kids for whom English is their second language in particular, are resilient and demonstrate grit. But we seldom ask ourselves, but at what cost? What's required to show up in spaces where you have to prove everybody wrong, right? And do
all
the
the
things that
time.
happened when Olivia was talking to Papa Pope in the opening of the second season of Scandal, and he said, "What's the one thing I always taught you?" And she said, not even looking at him in the face, to work twice as hard to get half as far. And every Black person around the country said, "Amen."
Amen.
Right? So I'll spend a little bit of time here because I think it's important to ensure that we do the work required to understand that this is about holistic health and well-being, that we have to attend to our social and emotional health, that for us that requires ensuring that we have the mental health support that we need, not only in moments of tragedy, right? Like sometimes we have these conversations about health and well-being when reflecting upon things like the Pulse shooting in Orlando or
everyday killings in Boston
and amongst congregation members in South Carolina. But we have to be mindful of the everyday ways in which microaggressions or race and racism or institutional racism or bias in any form or fashion impact us, and be equipped to respond to that in ways that, again, allow us to be whole, happy, and healthy people. So those are three things that, again, I think are critical pieces to the strategy required to do that, which you described.
David, I thank you. I love you. I appreciate you. Currently, we are on the line with Mr. David Johns, Executive Director of the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. You are at the White House, Mr. David Johns. Where are you going to go next? What is in store for you next? I can't, when you're at the top of the mountain, you're like, damn, okay, what now?
Honestly, I continue to walk my stage. This job didn't exist when I moved to Washington. The conditions that exist now are not ones that I ever could have dreamt of, painted, or predicted growing up in Inglewood, California. And so much of my life and experience is a reflection of one, being loved and supported by a community of believers who ensured that I knew who I am and whose I am, and a reflection of what happens when one is supported and being able to identify his or her passion, and then equipped with the tools required to pursue it as if it is the only thing possible. And so, I have 207 days left in this role. That until this administration transitions, and I will continue to work as hard as I can to continue to support the legacy of our president, and to do the work of supporting our children and our communities and strengthening our country. And then I will take a break and then continue to do that which God has purposed for me to do, and whatever that looks like.
Peace and blessings, peace and blessings. Whatever that may look like, I would love to stay in contact with you. I love the work that you're doing. Last question, as far as curriculum is concerned, when can we see a federal initiative to dismantle the institutional racism that is in our history, that says that Christopher Columbus discovered America and nobody was here prior? The debunking the lies of, February is Black History Month, so let's focus on slavery until now. When are we going to see federally some sort of initiative to push the true history of who Black people truly are and what we've done and our contributions to life itself?
So what exists now in this regard are two things. One, I just said this last night, nobody has to wait until, and we should not wait until February to celebrate the contributions of the descendants of Africa. The same way we shouldn't wait to June to talk about the contributions of LGBTQ individuals. We shouldn't wait to October to talk about the contributions of Latinos or Hispanics. We should spend time every day celebrating the contributions of the diverse individuals that have contributed to our success. And that needs to happen in classrooms as well as in homes and communities. Our initiative, again, the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans, has a partnership with the Because of Them We Can campaign, a phenomenal campaign that is managed by Unique Joan Gibson and a brother named Chris Crawford. And they literally leverage multimedia and the beauty of our babies to make history very real and practical for everyone, not just for African Americans or Latinos, but for everyone. And so again, I offer them as a resource, www.becausefthem.com, for anybody looking to try and make history real at any point in time. Specific to your question about federal curriculum, the federal government doesn't design curriculum. Curriculum design is something that happens at the local level and that is managed often by school boards, elected or appointed, and then school systems. There's a relationship between the federal, state, and local government where there's a through line, to be clear, but the specific work around designing and implementing or identifying curriculum is one that is a local responsibility. The last thing that I'll just say, acknowledging that I am a political appointee, is everybody simply needs to go vote. And I say that because one might not ask for federal curriculum if one is elected to federal office who has a particular set of beliefs that suggest that certain people don't have or not.
We know what he's talking about.
I hope that that's clear. But
David, I love the way you tiptoed around that. That was a beautiful dance. Continue. I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's what that is. That's that we don't know. But yeah, I think that people need to go vote, and we need to be clear about opportunities to highlight and true curriculums in communities and at home.
Mr. David Johns, you can find him on Twitter, Mr. David Johns. You can find him on Facebook, David Johns. Or you can just simply go to the website to find out more about the initiative. And I went ahead and posted it on the Wake Up with Tayla Andre page. I thank you so much, Mr. David Johns. Any last words before we close out?
I want to say thank you to all the educators who do God's work, who are already up now working to conspire to ensure that all of our babies know that they are loved. A special shout out to our children's first and most important educators, their parents, their family members, the aunts, the uncles, the sisters, the cousins, the tios, the tias, the abuelas, who do the work of standing in the gap and supporting our babies when they do what we expect of them and when they don't. And again, just encourage everybody to honor the spirit of our brother Hilliard, who reminded us that I've never met a child, in particular a Black child, who is not a genius. And there's no secret to how we support them. The first thing we do for all of our children is to acknowledge them as human. And the second thing we do is to support them with love. If and when we can all do that and support other people's babies in the ways that we want to support our own, we will then find solutions to seemingly intractable problems and be better as a united set of communities and a country as well.
Thank you so much. Big City 101.3 FM. Waking Up with Tayla Andre, Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. to 7. That was Mr. David Johns, Executive Director of the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. I want to give a huge shout out and a huge thank you to all of the listeners, all of the callers, all those that participated on Facebook Live. Google+. Thank you to ZC Boston. Half price sushi on the weekends, free parking, free delivery, buck a shuck, $1 oysters for the first dozen. They deliver until 1 a.m. and bento boxes are $10. They are located at 801 Mass Ave. Faves with an S, natural with an S, beautyproducts.com. Please head over there for brand new summer line, amazing scents. You'll love it. Get you the pum pum wash, the rose infused oil, get you the all natural deodorant, because at the end of the day, your skin is the largest organ on your body, and anything that you put on it is absorbed, and that regenerates your cells. If you're putting chemicals inside of you, well, then maybe your body's going to be made up of chemicals. Do not forget that David Banner is coming to Boston July 23rd. Get your tickets for David Banner July 23rd. Those tickets are online, and you can also purchase them off Groupon. I want to give a huge shout out lastly to Coleman G. Howard. I'm wearing a shirt today that says Little Black Girls Dream Too. So in light of education, in light of Mr. David Johns, Little Black Girls Dream Too. Thank you, Coleman G. Howard. I thank you all. I love you. I appreciate you. And you know what tomorrow is, right? Freaking Friday. So thank you so much. I love you. I appreciate you. And I hope you have an amazing day. Mwah.
On the feature presentation.
You want to know something? I wasn't online for like 35 seconds. So you guys heard everything, but they did not. That's so horrible. So bad, so bad, so bad. How did you guys enjoy the show? For those that are still on Facebook Live. You enjoy? Yay! I'm glad you liked it. I love you. I appreciate you all. Today was an awesome event. Mr. David Johns and I met when I went to Kozbach, which was fantastic. It blew my mind. It completely blew my mind, and I think that all educators need to attend conferences like that on a regular basis. Not something that's once a year, but they need to attend damn near once a month. They're educators. They should be continuously educating, and I don't mean on best practices, but I mean on like simple things. Take it back to the basics, and that's what a lot of the breakout sessions discussed, was like taking it back to the basics and taking it back to the village. And how did we teach our children back in the village when we were, you know, half naked overseas, or maybe half naked here? You know, how were we learning? What were we learning? What were we being taught? Who was teaching us? What was the environment that we were taught in? Sitting at it. Listen, I went to a class yesterday, and I haven't been in class in years. I went to a class yesterday. I was going crazy. You cannot sit in front of a board for 10 hours a day and think that's teaching. That's not learning. We need to invest in our children in the ways in which that they learn. Do you guys remember, I know I always reference this movie. You guys remember The Fifth Element? And when she came back to life in a sense, and she was relearning everything, they showed her nothing but memes. It was like me, and she was going through the alphabet of nothing but memes. We are currently in a state where our children are reading memes and learning off Instagram more than they're learning in school. Why aren't we teaching our babies the way in which they learn? Don't sit me down, think I'm going to read and then write for the next 10 hours. It's not going to be. Who would I be today had I been taught in the way in which I learned? Who would you be today if you were taught in the way that you learn? Some of us are audio, some of us are visual, some of us are there's like 5 different ways of learning. Some of us are hands-on. But we don't teach our babies in the way in which they learn and say, oh, you're a circle, well, you don't fit into the square. I'm sorry, you failed. Oh, you're a triangle, you don't fit into the circle. Well, I'm sorry, you failed. We are failing our children by not teaching them in the way in which they learn. And it doesn't go for just disabilities. That's for everybody. That's any child, every child. Just like every person is different, every child learns differently. Why do we have one model of school? Why don't we have this school that teaches with hands-on? Why don't we have this school that teaches, you know, audio? This school teaches with visual. This teaches with, you know, just reading. Like, we need to start having little pilot schools. And Ron Dorsey said this yesterday in a meeting that I attended, that you know, we can't get results without taking a risk. And I don't want to risk our children's education, but at the same time, when we've been doing the same thing, expecting a different result, I'm not going insane. I want something different for my children. And aside from wanting it, I'm demanding it. And I'm part of that conversation. I'm at the table. You ain't gonna invite me, baby. I got my folding chair. Shirley Chisholm said it when she said, oh, they didn't invite me to the table. It's okay, my folding chair right here though. We got to start taking them folding chairs everywhere we go and say, oh, I'm not invited. That's okay. You don't have to invite me. But I'm going to sit right here, though, and start being a part of those conversations that we usually aren't even in or aren't even invited to. So I thank you. I love you. I appreciate you. I hope you guys have an amazing day today. Mwah! Oh, if you guys know anybody who wants to be vendors for David Banner, have them hit me up. Have them contact me, because we do need a few more vendors, and I would love a food vendor. If we can get like an African spot or, of course, a West Indian spot, that would be dope. And we have clothing. We have Faith Naturals, of course. We have bow ties. So, you know, something creative, something different. If you know somebody with a dope business, have them hit me up. And that is TaylaAndre.com. Love and appreciate you, baby. Mwah!